always having a yard sale, but it was just our dignity, you know?
We chanted the mother song. We held our breath. Inhale. Exhale.
You're listening to Public Comments, an arts equity radio show on WXNA 101.5 FM, Nashville.
Hello, I'm Christine Hall.
And I'm Lydia Yousief.
We are your hosts for Public Comments, Saturdays on WXNA LP Nashville 101.5 FM from 1 to 2 p.m. Central. We thank you all for joining us. Here on the show, we are building an artist-centered narrative about the Title VI complaint process that got artists their money back here in Nashville while exposing discriminatory funding practices. This show is an archive and a roadmap as we continue advocating for the equitable arts funding our city deserves. Now, today's guest was scheduled to be Nicole Williams, and we want to send out our well wishes. Nicole was not able to join us today, so we are sending get well feelings, and we know you are all as well. We appreciate Nicole Williams' work as a freelance writer and a columnist here in Nashville, bringing a lot of attention to many issues that need attention. If you're interested in finding out more about Nicole Williams' work and how you can support her, she is at Startles Easily on X and Instagram, startleseasily.bsky.social on Blue Sky, and www.patreon.com/startleseasily. So since this is public comments, and we like to spend our time unpacking some of the issues going on in the arts community under the format of, hey, let's say, here's a public comment, like one might hear at a publicly noticed meeting. Usually they're only 2 minutes long, and then we spend an hour unpacking. We thought we might start up by paying tribute to Nicole Williams by playing a public comment that she gave at the March 11th, 2024 specially called Arts Commission Oversight Committee. And this was immediately preceding the drop of the HR report by independent counsel Luther Wright, who I believe was retained by Metro Legal. We got a team of lawyers, but they need some more. Here we go with Nicole Williams' public comment.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I just wanted to start this meeting off by pointing to a couple of issues that I think are inherent in the calling of this meeting. Article 8 of your commission's bylaws, so your governing documents, state that special meetings may, upon proper notice, be held at any time and any place and may be called by the chair, or the secretary shall call such meeting at the request of any 8 members of the commission. I would love to know who called the meeting. I have reason to believe it was not the chair who called the meeting. I also have reason to believe that commissioners have been communicating about commission business outside of a publicly noticed meeting in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So that's an issue. The agenda for this meeting was put up on Thursday with about 48 business hours to go until the meeting, and then changed on Friday. I would encourage the commission to take all of this information into account, as any actions you take today could be subject to legal challenge. I also want to remind you all that you do not supervise the staff. Article 3 of the bylaws state the executive director shall be delegated responsibility for the employment and supervision and removal of professional and clerical staff. The commission does not supervise staff directly. And basically, I just want to ask a question, like, is this really how y'all want to operate? Even if it's not legally suspect, which I contend that it is, it's not right what you're doing and how you're doing it. And you came in here to, like, do good governance or whatever. Tell me that this is good governance. Thank you. 30.
Oh, thank you, Nicole Williams.
Is this really how y'all want to operate? That was such an iconic public comment because you could feel the tension in the room, because this was right after the MHRC report had come out too on March 4th, 2024. So instead of discussing the discrimination allegation, they wanted to discuss this HR report.
Retaliation was the word of the day.
Right. Completely glossed over any like discrimination and historical defunding of communities, and they were like, no, let's focus on Daniel Singh and let's make him the problem. And I think it was just really iconic of her to come up at that meeting and be like, you're about to like tackle an individual on the premise that he did X, Y, and Z wrong. He can't work with departments. He did this technically wrong, and this was a technical violation, but y'all are in multiple violations. She mentioned 3 legal violations, not publicly noticed, not called by the chair.
Talking with each other outside.
Yeah.
But if we focus on personalities enough, we don't have to worry about the principles.
The rules don't apply. Not to everyone equally, right?
Well, I mean, it's selective when, certain people get to make the rules and then choose how to apply them and to whom.
Yeah.
We really appreciate having people who are willing to name that.
Yeah. And then the second part of her comment being like the commission does not direct staff, I think is just also such a really important point, because that has come up multiple times, even recently, about how commissioners are acting and which staff get to direct what. So that's been a huge topic. I think we'll get into that today as well, is like how much of this has been about like Thrive artists don't know how to grant manage, and Daniel Singh didn't know how to work between departments, and all of you equity people are like non-legal and you don't know how to do anything by the law, and it's illegal to do this, and they're in multiple violations, just running their whole department willy-nilly.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, and being willing to, for instance, admit that supposedly they had been running Thrive illegally for 10 years, but without any particular explanation about that. And now we get to feel the impact of that decision to follow through, I suppose, on. Well, that's the thing. Like, if you're actually going to hold someone to account, like, shouldn't that apply in every instance? And shouldn't we have a thorough unpacking of what the law is and why it applies here? And if we're going to say, well, we could change the code, but we're not going to do that this year because it takes too long. But then we never actually get into the steps of what that would take, and we just go on with our little stopgap solution, which isn't actually working for everybody.
Right. It's just very, that's why I love that she ended on the point of like, is this how y'all want to run this? Because this is y'all's choice, the way you are running this department and making these choices. There's very little room to continually blame every other department, every other staff member, every other situation at this point.
Right. And at that time, it was pretty clear they were looking for reasons to fire Daniel Singh. Yeah. And I mean, I remember when he first started on and was hired expressly as an equity worker to bring equity to a department that has it in its mission and now encoded in its purpose, but specifically had fallen short of realizing that, right, in many very easy to point out and prove ways. So they brought Daniel Singh on, and everybody was with it. Everybody was for it. Until the decisions actually came down and they realized how it impacted them and their friends, and realized that, if we actually do invite in funding for individual artists, that means we're going to have to share in a meaningful way, and we're not used to sharing. So let's roll that back, and it's all Daniel's fault. Whereas in the beginning, everyone was very happy to work with him, and at his performance review 1 month, everything was high marks. The very next month, once the decision came down, everything was suspect, and they were looking meeting after meeting after meeting with the audit, with the HCR report. So many different ways they tried to go after and find an infraction, a fireable offense, and then keeping them on a leave forever and ever. But it was at that meeting, right before she said, I was like, whew, again, saved just by someone willing to call out, like, you're naming this one equity worker for not upholding the letter of the law, whereas none of you are either.
I remember that meeting too because it was really stacked with a lot of people at that meeting and giving a lot of public comments, and so you could feel in the room, even the lawyer who was giving the HR report on that day was backing down from what he was saying because he realized how kind of ridiculous he was standing up there. He was kind of like, what was he saying? Like, he's like, I don't want to provide comment on that, or like it's in the report, and they were clearly trying to fish out, he basically came down to there was a disagreement between a staff member and a director about DEI or anti-racism. And obviously Daniel was saying, as a director, we're running this department in an anti-racist lens. And you had a staff member saying we need to do just a little bit of reform, DEI. And it was wild that he was framing that whole discussion as like a discussion between a director and a staff member not wanting to enact what the director's doing, which if any of you have ever had any manager or director before is crazy. But and kind of framing that as like a whole HR violation as opposed to a discussion between staff members and a director with a new staff person. So, and you could tell just very quickly that because of the people in the room reacting very negatively, even though the commission was like egging him on and wanting this lawyer to stand on business, but you could tell he did not like all the he couldn't handle the pressure.
I mean, he characterized some of the events that were described in the report as right up on the line of
on the line.
And that's the thing. A lot of these legal issues could be interpreted one way or another depending on where your bias is.
And this is very pertinent now because of what happened yesterday with the next round. I don't even know, like, we can't even call it a second round of defunding because defunding has been happening for decades. So it's like a little odd to be like, let's go round 2 defunding because it's multi-year. But whatever. Another year, another defunding.
Yeah, we're going to get into looking at how we got here because some decisions came down at the Arts Commission yesterday. Oh,
yeah,
brought our little cocktails. Instead, we have our healthy smoothies. Thank you, Lydia.
Yes.
Ooh, well, here's the thing. So we're here together, Lydia and I, Christine. Hello.
The girlies with the mics.
Yeah. And so here we are in the studio, and we haven't, perhaps in the context of this show, introduced ourselves. We ask usually our guests to tell us a little bit about their background and what brought them to the work. And I'm wondering, Lydia, would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I am currently the director of Mahabba Center in South Nashville, serving Arabic-speaking community members. We have a lot of programming through our organization. I'll talk about that in the public comment that I'm about to be reminiscent of when I speak later. So yeah, current director, I'm one of the founders, and I've been in Nashville all of my life, basically. I only took a 2-year gap to go to Chicago, thinking I was going to leave the city, and then I kind of came right back to start in Mahabba in 2019. And how I kind of got involved with this was during 2020, a lot of community members were furloughed or unemployed, and a lot of community members wanted to do something with the arts and felt like it was a moment of revival in a way, which I love. I love when community members are in the middle of a tragedy and there's a moment of let's create something, let's come together in a different way than we traditionally have. Especially if it's unsafe to all be together, let's think of new ways to connect. So in the heat of that, I connected with Metro Arts to see what we could do about funding. Our organization was super, super small, very little donations. We were working with predominantly working class folks, and our programming was free. So we were on the bare limbs type of organization, and it was only because there were funders who looked and said this is worth funding that we've kind of grew, and it was really important for that validation. We would have stayed very small if it wasn't for someone saying, we're going to trust you with a $10,000 grant. We're going to trust you with a $20,000 grant. And then, yeah, so I say that because that's going to connect back to Thrive whenever we talk about it, because I know how important it is to say we're going to trust your leadership. And I was writing budgets at the time. Sorry, this is going to go on a side rant, but I was writing budgets at the time. This is when I was looking yesterday at the grants committee meeting, and I saw like the huge discrepancy between what small organizations were paid, and I was like, I'm pretty sure they're not writing their budgets right, because I wasn't writing my budget right, because I was writing literal material things that we were using, and I wasn't accounting for, like, I was putting in 40 hours free. That's free labor that I was putting in, and I was working in restaurants to make up my money. So and I had not even calculated that amount of free labor that was going, and not just me, there were multiple other volunteers who were building up this org. So yeah, so of course, like, I was sending in these small budgets to grant makers, and they were like, okay, small budget, small grant. And it wasn't until someone said, you're doing these budgets wrong, and put in the correct amount of money to build up the org, that we got to where we are. So yeah, long story short, that's how I got involved with Metro Arts. And then I figured out a lot of, like, other problems within Metro in working with communities, and the way resources were not coming into our community, but they were there. I think, like, a lot of people, if you had asked me like 5 years ago, why isn't there like translation work and language access in Nashville, I would have been like, maybe it's a budget problem. And now, looking back, I'm like, oh, it's not a budget problem. It's a choice. It's a policy choice. So yeah, that's basically where I come into this space. I think Metro Arts has taught me a lot about the full other side of Metro, and has been a way for me to engage with all the other departments. So that's moi. I think my one fun thing, because let's end on a fun thing. I recently was trying to make fried cauliflower with a friend, and this is like a very odd thing about me. When I do it with my mom, I can do it right. When I do it by myself, I can't. Oh. I don't know what it is. So I did it. I was like so confident, because I was like, this is like the 10th time I'm doing it, and every time it fails, and then I come back to my mom, and then I do it anyways. So don't ask me to make fried cauliflower. It's the end of that.
Oh, darn, I have a cauliflower in my veggie drawer. I'm trying to figure out what to do. I'm still
I'll send you the
roasting.
recipe.
Thank you. Yeah, I always want something new to fry, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Let's
introduce yourself, Christine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was going to check for somebody we could fry. But all right. Hi, I'm Christine Hall. I am a multidisciplinary artist and an advocate, and advocating for the arts is my life work. I have hosted and produced a lot of events through the years. I had a DIY punk past. I was on the streets in San Francisco when I was a teenager. I hitched around the country for a while and settled back in Nashville, where my family was at the time. And in 2005, I fell in love with an old building in Germantown before that neighborhood started getting built up. And I thought, with a bunch of my artist friends, we could do something like a community arts center. We had some strong visions for Nashville, felt the city coming awake, smelled that, and wanted to jump right in. It was that time when it was still affordable for the most part, and artists could squat somewhere and make something. So we tried to go legit, but we ran into some trouble with codes and got shut down after about 8 months. But during that time, we had shows at the Belcourt, at Springwater, at Hair of the Dog. We were having just a grand time, and it gave me a glimpse into what was truly my dream. People living and creating and cooperatively envisioning and realizing life together, right? Working as a collective, working collaboratively, working in this way. We were realizing exponential degrees of expression because we were informed by each other's work, and we were putting ourselves into new spaces, and spaces that weren't necessarily dedicated to art, but art is life, right? I mean, like creativity, this force that's everything starts in the imagination, and then we bring it through to manifestation. And so we were practicing that. And so since then, I've been rather obsessed with the idea of making that a sustainable thing. And I mean, I hosted an open mic for a while for poets, and my parents used to drag me to singer-songwriter open mics, and my dead ex-husband ran a comedy open mic, and I had this idea that everybody needs a turn to share their voice. And running that spoken word open mic for 8 years was a really good preface for, say, giving public comments, right? You get to practice using your voice and projecting it out in the world and speaking about something you're really passionate about. And so when I was done hosting that open mic, it was that same day that I was invited to serve on the Metro Arts grants editing panel. And I thought that was kind of a cool, seamless transition because I went from being an unfunded community organizer, right, welcoming people from the community into the space where we all took turns sharing our voice and realizing the power that we all shared in that space, and then saying, well, hey, during the pandemic, I noticed my counterparts in other countries were funded by their governments, and like that would be kind of cool for like me to be able to live, not just constantly being stranded back because people are asking me to do this. That wasn't my idea. I was asked to do this, right? So I just wanted to leave it one better behind me, and so I took up the torch of advocating for arts funding. And at that grants editing panel, Lydia was there, a few other artists, and I thought that was an exciting opportunity. It sounded like with the climate at Metro Arts at the time and with Daniel's leadership that there was an actual willingness to implement equity and to spread the funding around, not just to the top where it's been concentrated, but reinvesting in the roots of independent artists who make the city really exciting to visit and to live in, and also where the next big thing is sure to come from. So it made sense to me, and yeah, we started advocating. It's been a push and pull. We win money, they take it back, we win it back, and here we keep on. We keep going.
Yeah, we do. It is actually freaky that during that grant setting panel, we were seated right next to each other.
Yeah.
Invisible string theory.
And then at the defunding in August 2023, we were seated on either side of a commissioner who was really making us very mad. I don't even want to name him right now. I'm glad he's gone. I gotta say, it's so interesting, the people who will say they're for equity and then turn around and vote against it. I just really want us to realize a time where people think and speak and act all in alignment. That would be great.
That would be lovely. Where you get that? Amazon?
We're practicing here.
Yeah.
So, we see a lot of the lip service and the glad handing and the photo ops. We want to see actual encoded equity. Define it and do it. And it's pretty easy to define.
I'm starting to think that the floundering around this term has been fascinating. Because they were defining a couple months, like December, January, they were defining reopening the application for Thrive and fiscal sponsorship as equity. And they were like, this is what is equitable, because we were thinking of canceling all your applications, you peasants. So now that we're giving you the opportunity to do it with a fiscal sponsor, just say, thank you, sir, and move on.
Let's tighten the belt till you can't breathe, so when we let it out, just one little peg, you'll be like, thanks.
Yeah. And they're like, that's equitable. Like, what more do we need to do for you all?
Right. The increments of the 2 steps backward and maybe 1/2.
Right. And even, I think now they're going to try to frame privatization, because
Well, this ain't working.
Yeah, they're like, oh, shucks. Fiscal sponsorship is not working, which is what we've been saying for months. Nope, this is not going to work out. And they said, well, I guess the only way to do it, if government won't do it, is a corporation.
Wow. Again, we're right here in the micro of the macro, because we see this issue being implemented on a large scale where they just make the government dysfunctional, basically. And they're like, oh, well, see, it's all got to be for profit.
Right. I think, yeah. And I think it's the same people who, maybe every evening they're like, I can't believe what Donald Trump is doing. And they're crying, screaming, throwing up about it. But you know what? It's happening in Nashville. The same type of corporate rule, the same type of oligarchic rule. I've said it multiple times in public comments of, if you're not willing to listen to the people, because that's the literal definition of democracy, who are you listening to? If you're listening to the oligarchs, that would make this an oligarchy. If people can sign a petition and send multiple emails and go in and make multiple public comments and say, hey, we don't want fiscal sponsorship. We don't want privatization. Here's a concept. We want our government to work. Very difficult concept. Then, and y'all do the exact opposite and then say, we want to hear from you.
It's quacking like an oligarch.
I know. It's very gaslighty to say, we're listening and we're taking in your feedback. No, you are not. No, you are not. You can see that very clearly with what is happening with this defunding.
I mean, we've given the answer key and the test has not changed.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Listeners, if you are just tuning in, this is WXNA LP Nashville 101.5 FM. The show is called Public Comments. I'm Christine Hall.
And I'm Lydia Yousief.
And here we are exploring options for equitably funding the arts here in Nashville. And as part of our rigmarole on public comments, sometimes we entertain those. Lydia, you had a public comment back at that infamous August 2023 Metro Arts meeting where the vote from the July 23 meeting that fully funded Thrive and was our first equitable distribution of arts funding in Metro Arts history, that was recalled. But before that, a bunch of artists were invited to come back and yet again plead our case like we hadn't already. Oh, we want to hear from you. And at the time, there were some issues with recording the meetings and making them available to the public. So there is no record of this brilliant comment that Lydia gave, which at that meeting was allowed to go over 2 minutes. So now I am wondering, Lydia, would you like to share that comment with us in its full extent?
I sure would.
Yes.
Thank you for saying that it's over 2 minutes. Just brace yourselves, y'all. All right. Also, I have it on my phone, and I'm -6 in both eyes. So
turn it
just
sideways.
Turn it sideways. Oh wait. I have the little because I hate when it does that. Okay.
Right.
This is okay. Ooh, Christine, you have revolutionized my life.
It's from the open mic.
Okay. Not me. Okay, with the iPhone being not turning it sideways. Okay, anyways. Just a really eye-opening moment. No. Now I can see y'all and I don't have to hold it to my face. Okay. My name is Lydia Yousief. I'm the director of In Mahabba Center in South Nashville. In Mahabba Center started in June of 2019 to address the lack of resources being distributed to working-class Arabs in South Nashville and its surrounding area. We have 12 programs, including an adults art class and a middle and high school art class run out of Southeast Library in Antioch. We are the only nonprofit in all of Nashville that caters to 50,000 plus residents working and living in this city. Arabic is the third most spoken language in Nashville, but because of the continuous cultural erasure, most of you probably only know that as a statistic and not as a lived experience of being in Nashville. Today, you all will be making decisions that impact hundreds of thousands of people, and for decades. With that in mind, I want to share with you what's at stake for our people. What happens when decades of tax dollars do not return to the people who work to provide it. During one of our art classes in South Nashville, kids in a room of Egyptian, Ethiopian, Latinx kids who wrote a song together with a Nashville songwriter in English. During one of those classes with a room. We wrote a song together with a Nashville songwriter in English. One of the Egyptian girls asked the songwriter, a white woman, "So what do you do then?" The white woman responded, "Oh, I'm a songwriter and a nanny." The Egyptian girl replied, "What is a songwriter?" The white woman answered, "I write music for singers like Taylor Swift, you know?" The Egyptian girl said, "That's a job?" We didn't have time to explore this question, this dilemma with the kids that day, but these are the kinds of conversations we need to have. Hearing that conversation led me to think of another Egyptian girl in Antioch who told me that she wanted to be a singer. And I told her, "Well, you're in Music City." And she said, "What do you mean?" Before that, I was contacted by a Coptic professor in Canada to work on a Coptic Women Sing To project to research and record Coptic women singing, instructing, and carrying out centuries-old practices in diaspora. She told me she was interested in Nashville because of the Southern Egyptian working class community, knowing that Southern Egyptians have retained a lot of Coptic and ancient language in their Arabic and in their musical form. For the project, she asked the choir made up of 30 to 40-year-old Coptic women to perform a Coptic song that they had practiced. Despite recording them and archiving their art alongside other Coptic women singing across the country, but uniquely in Nashville, it was a choir where women are forbidden by the diocese to sing during liturgical services in a choir. We still have not been able to have the capacity to host a concert for these women singing in Arabic and Coptic. Just last year, I met an Egyptian Muslim woman who plays oud, the Arab lute. This is so rare. Most oud players are men, whether internationally or in diaspora. But because there is no funding, this factory worker who writes music when she finds the time between caring for her kids, work, and studying for the driver's license test can't share her art form. In both Knoxville and Atlanta, there are Arab festivals. Knoxville's festival, because their community is small but rich, is centered on businesses and making art consumable to non-Arabs. In Atlanta, there's an Arab festival centering art and language and is absolutely beautiful. We don't have an Arab festival in Nashville. No funding, no capacity, but the demand and the community is ready. Twice, I've tried to do Arab movie nights to showcase Arab cinema. While both events were successful, and now we have community members who want to plan a Nashville Arab Film Festival like Chicago's or LA's, we still don't have the capacity to even imagine such an event despite need and no funding. A few weeks ago, I was in a bodega and ran into a community member who's a writer. I asked him how his wife was doing, if they had enjoyed their trip to Egypt, how his son is at Lipscomb. We spoke about the translation of his anthology, an anthology whose working title in English is Welcome to America, is being translated in England by an Egyptian literary translator to be published in Nashville. Mr. Samir is well known in Alexandria, Egypt's literary community because he is a writer for the Tennessee Arab newspaper. Most of you have probably never heard of it. Growing up in Nashville, when I was in middle school and high school, Mr. Fauzi, Allah yarhamu, self-financed this newspaper. He edited it, curated writers, published it online and in print, and distributed it at local businesses and churches. The newspaper was international, with writers from Alexandria, his home city, publishing their thoughts and debates on recent global politics, and Arabs from Nashville responding. Most people in Nashville and maybe in Alexandria have a better idea of what the Tennessee Arab newspaper is than they do the First or the Nashville Opera or the Symphony. Personally, on Sundays when he distributed the paper monthly, my mom would get a copy, go to the car, open all the windows, sit and read while my father went to go and get coffee and snacks for us to break our 4-hour fast after liturgy. When he'd return, she'd tell him about the poems that were in it, who disagreed with whom, and who was distasteful, and who was nice. Mr. Samir wants to revive his old friend's paper, but instead of running around and getting ads, he wants to do it as a full-time zine with Arabic and English publications. He's retired, so he can't finance it. I told him that I would apply for funding, and I'm waiting. Mr. Samir, who led protests downtown during the revolution in Egypt in 2011 to stand in solidarity with family members and friends here, nodded with tears in his eyes and went to get his groceries. Just about a year ago, I was in Cairo, and I was pleasantly surprised by the number of free galleries in every corner, murals, graffiti, Roman walls, old synagogues, all mingled with the explosion of free art spaces, to simply be in the presence of art, no matter the neighborhood. I think about how many people have lost in coming to this country, in laboring away for this country in places like Tyson Factory or the Omni Hotel. One time, a volunteer who was delivering furniture to newcomers was with me, told me, "By the way, I'm a carpenter." I asked for him to explain. He showed me a picture of an icon. One of the Coptic churches here in Nashville has original paintings from a local iconographer hanging on the altar front. That's 6 hand-painted icons, they're really massive, made in Nashville. Nashville is also home to 2 of the most renowned Coptic papyrus painters, 2. One of whom spoke during our Shaman Nassim party back in April about his craft and how he learned it in Cairo. He works as a retail shopper here in Nashville. The other, Abdel Gabbour, who is a super famous papyrus painter in Egypt, travels between Cairo and Nashville. Nashville is also home to a bona fide Arabic calligraphist who used to make calligraphies of Quranic verses for people's home in Ma'adi, Cairo. He works as a truck driver here. A Syrian refugee, an older woman, works to provide for her teenage kids. She is struggling and reached out to Mahabba and said she's a tailor by trade pre-war. We opened up a sewing class for her on Saturdays in Southeast, and we pay her $50 an hour to teach the class. When I met her, she bragged, "I made this dress," and twirled the dress she was wearing. An Iraqi community member in MTSU wants to animate what she feels when she leaves the country with everyone else behind. Last year, an Egyptian Muslim uncle came to our art gallery at Vanderbilt about Coptic space making. He was surprised to hear the Adhan, the Muslim call to prayer, knowing that it was a Coptic exhibit, and we shared a beautiful conversation about Muslim and Christian allyship. He read during one of our live streams a poem of his. Earlier this year, we hosted a Palestinian poet who, during his recitation over Zoom, said, "Do you hear that?" referring to the fighter jets above, interrupting the Zoom feed from Gaza to Nashville. I'm going to kind of skip over a little bit. What is at stake for us is not a Christmas bonus or some drop in the bucket in our multi-million-dollar budget. What's at stake for us is to be fully human. The damage has been done. There are parts of the city that will never remember us, never know us, because of the decisions made in this room to fund white people's fantasies while our cultures die. It is a privilege to be remembered, even more so to destroy others' arts in order to be remembered. What happens when a culture survives wars, famines, invasions, new governments and regimes, and even British colonialism in the case of Iraqis and Egyptians, but cannot survive U.S. domestic imperialism? When people put food on your tables but can't practice what they love. When they have to work overtime to pay rent but don't have time to tell their children how to sing. What's at stake for us is to be proud of this city, to be able to tell a friend, "There's this cute gallery near this coffee shop," or "Let's visit this mural that's near the bodegas because it tells our history and it's a must-see," or "This park has a statue by a refugee who lives in this city too," or "Let's go to this festival." We want this to be a city that reflects all of us, not just those of us who live off the labors of others and who dictate what art is, and who can make it and who cannot make it, who can and cannot access it. We worsen our city, its dreams and everything in between, when we fund the management of arts and not artists. And imagine that trickle-down economics applies here too. I think at this point I inserted a quick remark to one of the public comments that was before me about losing $10,000. And I added a remark about it is sad that it's coming down to a white-led organization saying they can't lose $10,000 when someone like me, we constantly are losing when we apply to grants, $5,000, $10,000, and we make our budget work and we make our programming work for our community members. So perhaps the issue is that you're upset that you're being treated like women of color. We have waited, we have funded your buildings, your sword-making projects, your little art sessions, your ticketed events, your let's gather the homeless and make a choir, and your let's teach these brown kids about Western music because they're savages grant applications. We have waited. Do the right thing.
Oof. Lydia, thank you. Listeners, if you're just tuning in, this is WXNA LP Nashville 101.5 FM. That was a public comment from Lydia Yousief from August 2023, when the Metro Arts Commissioners recalled the vote that fully funded Thrive, the project-based funding that most closely represents Nashville's demographics, and instead they favored the legacy organizations who have always received the lion's share of the funding. And that was after hearing such heartfelt testimony, after years of hearing such heartfelt testimony.
Yeah. I think that's why, for me, when people are like, maybe they made a mistake in defunding, or maybe they misunderstood, or maybe they like really relied on legal, and I will tell you, as someone who is very pessimistic about systems of power, even when I was sitting in that room and hearing all those community members share their stories, I was like, there's no way they're gonna defund. This is gonna look, there's no way you can look at so many people and say, we're not gonna give you the funding.
Right. Well, and that one certain commissioner who we were sitting on either side of during the part of the meeting where we were not allowed to talk anymore, they were saying how there had been a promise made to the arts monopolies that they wouldn't lose any funding, to hold them harmless, right? And when we're not even considering all of the implicit promises, right, for a democratic government to serve all of its people.
That part.
Right. But also that we had done those grants edits, that they had invited the public in, that they were reaching people that they had never reached before, and that there were so many who had never been reached before. And here were people taking their 10th serving, while some communities hadn't even gotten their first serving ever. Not a dime of funding.
Right.
And so many of the large organizations are so quick to say, well, first of all, they'll say, well, we employ BIPOC artists. But also they will say, well, if you cut this $10,000 from our organization, that's going to come from the community's funding, right? Certainly never an executive salary or a gallus, no.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about that is they want to define, especially the art monopolies, they want to define equity as it benefits them. So they want brownie points, they want extra funding because they're including Black and brown people, which, if you really think about it, is a little bit sick, right? Like, they're just like, we only want to do, only want to pay, and not very well, white artists and European-centric arts. And if we have to include BIPOC, we need a little bit extra money on that end, right? Like, or we need an extra pat on the back, or we need something. But I think what's really important is that we at Arts Equity Nashville have never defined equity as something that only benefits ourselves. Like, certainly Christine doesn't even apply for funding, fiscal sponsorship was not something that would have impacted two of the complainants, at least, of the Title VI complaints, or even Cynthia Harris, who did the mayoral forum and held the mayoral forum with you. So, like,
and one of our early guests here.
Yes. So I think that's also very important, is that there are people who will give you their definition of equity, and they'll go to the commission meeting and they'll do their public comments, but you have to notice they're saying it's equitable because it benefits them. And then there are people who are going to give you the definition of equity as it is in, the dictionary. This is not hard work. Because
if you're wondering, just look it up, please.
Yeah,
please.
You got Google. Google's free. And it's something that benefits all communities, and not just their org or them as an individual artist and their identity or their art form, but it benefits the larger community. So that also has annoyed me about equity, is because we keep not you Googling equity.
I'm
You're
gonna
like,
bring
let
it
me
up.
pull it up.
Bring it up.
We should have timed you. Not that quick. According to Google.
I mean, that's one of them, yeah. Treat people fairly and impartially. Freedom from disparities, right? I mean, like, the way we usually apply it is, like, make the funding match the tax base.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Let's start there. Let's start with just government being a government. And if you're going to take money from people, distribute it back with resources. That's it.
Well, and Lydia, you serve on the CARE committee, the Committee for Anti-Racism and Equity, which for as long as I can remember has been working on a definition. I mean, we can do better than Google, but I'm just wondering, it's been a while since you've had a meeting, right?
Yeah, and we came up with a decent definition. I think there were issues around. I wanted to push for equity, the definition, because the definition is particular to Metro Arts, so it's not just a generic.
Let's know it in practice, not just in theory.
What does that look like for someone who's providing grants into the community? So I wanted, in the definition, something to include about artists, artist-centered, and there were certain members of the CARE committee that did not want it to say only artists, which to me is like, you can be an organization and still be artist-centered. There's no exclusion of organizations when you talk about artists.
And we're not trying to prioritize the administrators or the management over the artists in these organizations, are we? Aren't they about the arts?
Yeah. It's a really wild pushback that I got, because it's prioritizing somebody who's actually doing, even if you're that's your livelihood. And I get it also because I run an organization. So a good chunk of my livelihood is platforming people, and making sure the right people are in the right spaces and helping people get where they need to get. So I'm not dunking on any management person per se, but I do think an artist-centric model is the only way you can do equity. If you're going to continually say corporations, organizations, these amalgamated, to me even it sounds ridiculous to say equity is about centering organizations. What is an organization?
Well, to get super
humans,
right? To get super political, the idea that money is free speech, that corporations are people. This is infected the thought here, and we need to clear ourselves of this and really see people for people and creativity for creativity, and understand what is worthy of funding is going to be what directly benefits the community and the people in the community.
Right.
And that's going to be artists from within the community who are reflecting their community, making work that speaks to the community, and they're making that work in community, and the benefits of that are exponential.
Right. And I also have kind of an issue with the government giving money to nonprofits to do the artwork, to me this is adding a middleman that you don't really need sometimes.
I get upset, I was on the grant selection panel. I get upset seeing applications where the administrators are getting funded, but the artists in that organization are volunteers. That's concerning for me, that so many of the organizations will say, but we hire BIPOC artists. And you don't pay them a living wage. And that's a fact. And I know that as a working artist.
Yeah, there were a lot of applications, 2022, 2023, that were we have a Black board member. And it was I don't know what to do for you. You are getting a low score.
We're also very impressed.
Yeah, I'm glad you work in North Nashville and you have one Black person involved to offer you free labor. So it's just, I don't know. Sometimes I'm it shouldn't be this difficult for us to want what is best for one another. But I don't know. It is an uphill battle with
and with so much of it open for interpretation, which is why we keep pushing for the definition of equity.
Yeah.
We can have it in the mission statement. We can have it encoded in the purpose. We can have it in the dictionary. But we do need to know what it looks like in practice for Metro Arts. And it is something that's important to our entire city and beyond that. It's got implications far-reaching in our world right now. Recently we got an email, right? One of the statistics we bring up pretty regularly, it was in the MHRC report, and that's that since Metro Arts started giving out this grants funding, 70% of those dollars have gone to 10 organizations. And those are, of course, mostly white-led. Almost virtually exclusively. So we get an email that says, Well, that's no problem, and they should be prioritizing Western art forms because this is the Western world.
Yeah. A lot of this language is very coded, so I'm glad someone like that just went ahead and just say what you want to say, But I feel like a lot of times when we talk to art monopolies or people who are pro-art monopolies, it's always just very coded, like, without the art monopolies, there would be no Metro Arts, because who's going to advocate for arts funding, even though, that's been very obvious that community members have been.
Yeah, I didn't see them there at the pre-budget public hearing this year.
Ooh.
I wonder why not.
Backdoor deals. Sorry, I could not help myself.
That is why we're here. Saying it out in the open.
Girl,
maybe sometimes under the breath. Yeah. Actually, this made me think of the surplus this year. Oh, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we talk about what happened yesterday? What happened was, and then go into how we got there. In the last 9 minutes, let's do it. Let's be messy. So what happened yesterday was a defunding. So for months, Arts Equity Nashville has been sending emails, making public comments, multiple petitions, a lot of labor, y'all, to say that fiscal sponsorship will lead to the defunding of Thrive artists. And that, in essence, when we say that, what we mean is that it's going to be inequitable, and it means that you're going to recenter the funds towards downtown Nashville, Belmead, Green Hills, and take away money from our communities on the periphery, right? So that's what we mean when we say defunding. I want to be very, very clear about that. Because
accessibility has implications.
Yeah. So they went ahead and went through with it. They gave no explanation as to why only fiscal sponsorship. They'll send emails and they'll say, finance said so, which is to me not a response. Like someone says, my mom told me,
Right.
Well,
and also they'll delay for a whole year just so they can hurry and create an emergency situation and say, well, this is a transitional year and we'll get it right next year. But they've been doing that every year. It's, we got to defer this, just wait. And, oh, wait, no, now we're on a deadline and we got to hurry. Oh, don't worry if it's not perfect. I'm so sorry we didn't do equity. Or this is equity, right?
Yeah. So when we were concerned about fiscal sponsorship for multiple reasons. One, because they should have scored the applications as they had received the applications and made those promises to those artists. They should have just fulfilled that as best as they could. Yeah.
And if the mechanism, if they had to, for instance, let's just give them that you absolutely can't find a way to do it this year because finance won't let you without doing the sponsorship. There was another way to do that too, because Arts Equity was able to, just by putting out the call, find several fiscal sponsors who were willing to do it for 0%.
Right.
So with, the resources that Metro Arts has, certainly they could have put up a workable system with all the lead time that they had.
And they could have just said 0%. They could have just
that
said...
was an option too.
Yeah.
There were all sorts of ways to do this.
Yeah. Like we want fiscal sponsors to understand that artists are really... tied for this year, so we please offer it at 0%, or you cannot be a fiscal sponsor.
Right. Or the instructions could have been clear. Their form could have not required, say, the Giving Matters information for fiscal sponsorship, or the deadlines could have been actually where they were when they were.
Right. And to communicate new updates, there were multiple things and changes that were happening in the midst of that month of reopening the applications that they were not communicating to community members. So you don't need background checks now. You can just attest that you've done a background search, which was a major change. That they did as a backdoor deal. They didn't need to check in with finance or legal. They just had a little executive meeting and made that call. So just a lot of messiness. And In essence, even though for months we've been saying this is going to be disastrous, and I even was telling Christine back in November, like if they do fiscal sponsorship, it's probably only going to be like 100 applications that come back, and it came out to be even worse than that. So statistically, what happened was we had 201 Thrive applications in January of 2024. They got delayed, then they got reopened in January of 2025, last month, and told that they have to get their background check, attestation, and get their fiscal sponsorship paperwork, and then rework their budget because there will be no extension despite Metro delaying the funds. And when they reopened, that 201 applications became only 77 applications that reapplied. And then after scoring, that became only 74 who will get funded this year. For general operating, it was 109 applications that came through. And after scoring, it was 94 applications that will be funded, that were eligible for funding. So it's just a major, and then specifically for general operating, even though there's a huge focus at the commission meeting yesterday, there was a huge focus on the art monopolies will only be getting like 66, 65K, and they're used to 200K. If you look at all the distribution of the funding, you have organizations that are getting $900. And such small amounts and record low funding amounts to the roots of Nashville. So to those organizations at the roots of our community, on the ground, providing arts programming throughout our city, are getting the least amount proportionately compared to those at the top. So general operating in and of itself is a whole other scenario too, because that funding distribution got messed up pretty badly. And then obviously for Thrive, because of all the restrictions that were poured on to Thrive applicants, no reporting deadline or no reporting extensions. You got to find a fiscal sponsor. You got to do the background checks. You got to, and it was like multiple forms, y'all. So it was extremely inaccessible on the back end. It was less than 50% came back.
Ouch.
Yeah. So we are going to be waiting for those final numbers to see how those were distributed, because I'm sure people didn't ask for 20,000, which was the original amount that people could ask for, and how much people were giving to fiscal sponsors who could now double dip between general operating, and now they can double dip into Thrive and take a portion out of Thrive artists' budget.
Ooh, yes. Thank you for that rundown, Lydia. This is Public Comments, a show where we look into what on earth we can do to get the equitable arts funding that Nashville deserves. I'm Christine Hall.
And I'm Lydia Yousief.
And we are here Saturdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Central. We will be back next week. And I'm just wondering, do you have, in 1 minute, Lydia, if you were a commissioner, what would you do to fix it?
Oh, wow. Well, I would just pay individual artists.
Oh, what a good idea!
And I would have different buckets set up. So I'd have a different fund for festivals and one-time events for people to tap into year-round, and pay the individuals and pay organizations that have arts programming but are not arts only organizations.
I love it. Let's get inclusive. Let's see that in practice. And for our listeners, if you're interested in learning more, we're at artsequitynashville.org. We have a working artist survey if you're interested in giving your input on what it's like to be a working artist. That way we can all share information and make informed decisions. We're also on Instagram at artsequitynashville. And this is WXNA, LP Nashville 101.5 FM. Stay tuned for the Teen Power Radio Hour.
I was having a yard sale, but it was just our dignity, you know?
We chanted the mother song. We held our breath. Inhale. Exhale. Oh, but it's worth just living day.
You're listening to Public Comments, an arts equity radio show on WXNA 101.5 FM, Nashville.